Hi everyone, today we're going to take a look at the new flash from Godox. It's their V1 Pro model. And full disclosure, they did send this out to me to show you guys, but as always, I'll give you my honest and fair opinion. So I've been using Godox flashes and lighting products for many years now in both my professional work and personal projects. So needless to say, I'm really a big fan of the Godox system, particularly their X wireless system. I've always found their products to be very high quality. They're durable, they're reliable, extremely flexible with the X wireless system, and of course you get professional results at a very affordable price. And of all the products that they offer, I find that the one that I use the most is the Godox V1. Now you may see some flashes here branded as Flashpoint, but they are just rebranded Godox flashes. So let's talk about what's new and improved on the V1 Pro versus the V1 Standard. Now the first thing I notice about the V1 Pro is that it has this flash unit on the front, and honestly, I think this is the least important upgrade of the V1 Pro versus the Standard, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. But also, the head unit here is a little bit taller than the regular V1 to make room for better heat dissipation. So that's really the most significant change with the V1 Pro is its heat or overheating performance. With the regular V1, you could do 30 full power flashes and still get normal recycle times of like 1.5 to 2 seconds. But with the V1 Pro, you can now go 100 full power flashes before you start to get into overheating territory. And that can be a really big deal for event photographers and wedding photographers, or even doing modeling shoots where you're just firing image after image after image. You want your flash to be able to keep up and not overheat. And just to put that in perspective, you can fire off images for about a minute at full power with the original V1 before it starts to overheat, and then your recycle times get really long, 4, 5, 6 seconds at a time, sometimes longer, or it may not fire at all. Versus the V1 Pro, you can now go 3 or 4 minutes firing at full power before it begins to overheat. And if you're firing at less than full power, say half power, quarter power, you can go a lot longer with the V1 Pro, say versus the original V1. Another thing I think professionals will appreciate is you now have a port here to attach an external power pack. And what that's going to do for you is you'll get much faster recycle times, like less than 1 second. And also you get an extended run time. Whereas the internal battery is rated for 500 flashes, when you attach the external power pack to this, you can get up to 1800 flashes at full power. And those are the two key features I think professionals will really appreciate, especially if you're already running into overheating problems with the original V1 or whatever flash system you're using, and you need much longer run times without having to swap batteries. Now the V1 Pro has a few other upgrades that I think are not quite as critical, but are nice to have. And that is, we have now a TTL to manual switch right here on the side, so you don't have to look at the back of the screen anymore to switch from TTL to manual and vice versa. The battery pack. The battery now has its own built-in USB-C port, so you can charge the battery directly with any USB-C power supply. So that's really nice. You no longer need to bring this separate little charger with you. You can charge the battery directly via the USB-C port. It's just one less thing to forget. Also, on the bottom here, they have extended the screws to the hot shoe here to go deeper into the body of the unit here, so it's more durable or more secure. And if you're a Sony shooter and get the Sony version of this flash, the hot shoe itself is now all metal, whereas the previous V1 had sort of this metal plastic hybrid type hot shoe, and people are having problems with that. So they've upgraded the Pro model to be an all metal hot shoe mount. And then finally, the modeling lamp has been upgraded as well. In the previous V1 version, it had a very low CRI index, versus the new one has a much higher CRI index. So what that means is if you're using this as a video light, you'll get more accurate color rendition when you're recording video and using this as sort of a supplementary light. Now, in a lot of event photography, you're going to be using the flash on camera because you have to walk around a large venue and lighting conditions can change, and maybe you need to follow some people around, and also you're going to be using a lot of bounce flash as well. So of course the flash head can point straight up. You can also rotate it around this way to do verticals, or if you want the flash to fire behind you to get that backlight, this way you can do that. But One of the things I like about the Godox flash is you don't have to rotate the head all the way around if all you want to do is point the flash backwards, because the flash head tilts actually back a few degrees this way to give you that rear type of backlighting. Also, at a lot of event photography, you're going to be setting up off-camera flashes in fixed positions around the room, maybe around the head table or the dance floor, or maybe you have a small studio set up for doing portraits and quick shots. But you can control all of the off-camera flashes using the Godox V1 on camera, because this also acts as a radio trigger for the off-camera flashes. All right, now let's talk about this front-facing unit and why I think this is probably the least important upgrade of this flash. The idea behind this front flash, or sub-flash as they call it, is when you're using the main head unit as bounce flash, right? You're going to be using this as fill-in flash, because as you know, when you bounce the light off the ceiling directly above you and it comes straight back down, you can get some undesirable shadows on your subject. So you use the fill flash here to kind of fill in those shadows and get a more pleasing look. And it works pretty well in ideal situations, but this is the challenge. One is this flash can only be controlled manually. It is not working in sync with the head unit. So you could have the head unit in TTL mode, and then you're going to have to dial in the correct amount of power to the fill flash so it doesn't overexpose the image, but only fills in the shadows like you intended. And at an event or something where things are moving pretty fast, particularly you're moving around the venue and the lighting situations are changing, and you and the distance the subject is changing, or if you change your aperture or ISO, you know, any number of things is going to require you to change the output power of the fill flash so that it looks natural when it's mixed together with the main head unit here. So I don't think in an event this makes a lot of sense or is going to be as useful. And certainly you're not going to get consistent results shot to shot to shot, again, because you're moving around a lot and or the subjects are moving around. Now in a studio situation, this can be useful in very specific situations, right? Because you and the subject are probably at a fixed distance, and there's going to be very little change there. All of the other lighting is controlled. You have additional strobes set up around the studio, or if you're just using this on camera and you're bouncing this flash off a reflector or another wall, you can dial in pretty quickly the power that you need here to give you the effect that you want. But now the problem becomes that this is a hard light, right? So if your subject or your model is standing very close to the backdrop or the wall, this hard light is going to create a shadow directly behind them. Now, as a creative choice, because a lot of people like that effect, right? They like to see the shadow behind the subject. That's perfectly fine. It's just not a creative choice that I normally make. Normally when I do portraits and things like that, I don't want a shadow on the backdrop behind me. But in a studio, normally you're working with multiple lights, right? You're not using just on-camera flash. In fact, very rarely are you using flash on camera in a studio situation. So this becomes even less relevant. Now, the best thing about this unit is you can take it off, right? And just put it away. And the reason I say that is because I think the intent here of making this modular like this is they're going to develop additional accessories that you can attach to the front of the flash. I mean, the only thing that comes to mind for me right now is maybe they're going to add a nice video light rather than using this stinky little modeling light for supplemental lighting. You might be able to attach in the future a nice video light here in the front that actually outputs some decent light. But as it is, just leave it on the flash, right? And it becomes one of those things where it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, I guess, right? Now, usually the way photographers achieve fill flash is they use a bounce card. Now, this round head obviously does not have a bounce card, so you have to buy a separate kit. I think it's the AKR something, but and I highly recommend you get it because it comes with this diffuser. It also comes with like barn doors and grids and gels and things. So it's a very, very handy kit. I have one, but you might be thinking, right? Why not just use a square head? Because just about all of them have a bounce card filled in. So you can point this up the ceiling and you can get some decent fill light coming in the front. And honestly, I think this looks actually a little more natural. And it's going to be TTL compatible because we're just using the one light. So any fill flash that comes in off the bounce card is also going to be just about the right amount of power anyway, just by default. The only problem with the square head is when you want to do a vertical shot, right? And we do a lot of vertical shots at events and things. You're going to turn the camera this way to the side. You're going to rotate the head and point it up at the ceiling, for example. Now the bounce card is no longer facing the subject, so you're not getting that fill flash. And that's where the round head has an advantage here, is if I turn my camera to portrait mode and point the flash up, I can rotate this around to bring the fill flash back in. And even when I have it pointing up at the ceiling, I can rotate it back, or I can even angle it to any direction that I want. If I want a little more fill flash on this side or the other side, whatever. So the round heads are a little bit more flexible in that sense. You can buy adapters for the Godox square heads here that will let you adapt the round head accessories to it. So that's another option to go if you already have one of these. But if you're working with the Godox V1 system, these natively fit right on top. And I think it's probably the best way to use these accessories rather than getting an attachment for this. All right, so as I was saying before, in a studio situation where all of the lighting is controlled, you know, where you point the flash and reflectors, etc., the subflash does do its job. So if we look at the first image here, it's just bare bulb, flash pointing at 45 degrees. And you can see that the shadows are a little bit harsher on my face and the light fall off down towards my chest. It gets a little darker. And then when I add the dome diffuser to the flash at 45 degrees, the light spread is a little more even. The shadows are a little softer on my face, but now the shadow behind me is a little bit stronger as well. And then the next shot here is bare bulb flash with the bare sub flash. And here you can see we have, you know, nice fill-in. It looks pretty good here. And it looks a little better, I think, when you add the diffuser and use the sub flash at the same time as in this last picture on the right. Now going to the second row, I pointed the flash 90 degrees or straight up. And you can see here that the light fall off is more even now, but I'm still getting the harsh shadows on my face. And then when I added the diffuser, it does soften the shadows on my face a little bit, and the light spread is very, very even. And then when I add the sub flash, and I didn't change the power, I'm still at quarter power, it filled in the shadows in my face a little bit more, and the light spread, you know, top to bottom, left to right, is again a little bit more even. And it's very hard to tell here, but there is now a more pronounced shadow behind me. And then finally, I pointed the flash straight up, bare bulb, and the sub flash, of course, bare. And you can see that it did a pretty good job. But I think out of all of these images, the flash at 90 degrees straight up with the diffuser and the sub flash combined look the best. So with all that said and done, I think there's still a lot of nice upgrades here to get the Pro version over the standard V1 version. Certainly the extended runtime for the overheating, being able to shoot 3 times longer at full power versus the original V1. Also, the USB-C port here now on the battery pack, so you can charge it directly either in the flash or off the flash, is a really nice convenience, because otherwise you have to bring this separately and take the battery out. And you know, these are easy to forget, even easier to lose when you're traveling a lot and going on site. And for Sony shooters, now we have an all metal mount. So this alone is worth getting the Pro version versus, say, the standard V1 version for Sony shooters. For Nikon, Canon, Olympus, Panasonic, this is already an all-metal mount. And then finally is the power pack here port. So on camera, this is not quite as useful in my opinion, because it's easy enough to just swap the battery out. You know, you just push a button and it slides right out. But if you have this off camera, especially if it's mounted up high on a stand somewhere, being able to attach the external power pack so that when you do run low on power on the battery, you don't have to swap out the battery. It can run, you know, up to 1,800 shots with the external power pack attached. So that's certainly a huge advantage for studio work and event photography, where you have your lights set up in fixed positions. So I hope you enjoyed this review. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.